You might remember Aunt Clara's patchwork sofa from a while back. Well, today she's finally getting a proper wingback chair to go with it, since one of you suggested Aunt Clara could use a comfy sewing chair. I'm using the pattern that I used to make this chair as a base, but I'll be making it just a half an inch taller. I'll be starting with these pieces. I cut and glued 8 layers together to get about 1/8 of an inch thickness. Depending on your cardstock or food packaging, you may need to add or remove layers to reach that same thickness. While I was gluing the layers together for the side pieces, I gently curved the wing sections outward with my fingers before the glue was completely dry. They should look something like this now. I did the same for the back piece too, giving it just a slight curve backward. Once the glue felt dry enough, I sanded the curved areas to soften those hard edges. I only sanded where the curves are and left the rest as is. I also left the back edge of those curves alone. Only the front side gets sanded. Next, I glued the back to the side pieces, keeping the back edges flush so everything lines up cleanly. I decided since the chair bottom flares out in the front that it'd probably be a good idea to glue it on before I glue on the last side piece. But then I realized I needed to make the armrest and glue them on first. I glued 2.5 strips together from the armrest pattern pieces and then rolled them up using a small skewer to help it get started. I matched the second one to the first one to make sure they were the same diameter. Here's a tip to help glue both armrests in the same position. I add glue to the side piece like this, and then lay it with the inside facing down and glue the armrest in place. I let it sit this way until it's dry. This makes sure that each armrest hangs over the same amount. Now I'm adding some felt to pad the chair wings. I'm using felt, but you could use batting or even paper towels, whatever you have on hand. I love using this CraftBond glue stick from Elmer's when I'm gluing fabric. I wanted the wings a little fluffier, so I'm adding one more layer of felt. The first area I'm adding fabric to is the wings. I add a little glue between the fabric and the felt to help hold it in place. It still moves a little bit, but not as much. Then I trim around the curve and cut a few small notches so that the fabric can ease into the curve shape more smoothly. It's best to use lightweight fabric, but if you're working with something a little heavier, you might need a bit of Aleene's fast grab glue to help it stay in place. Oh, and make sure the fabric at the top of the chair overlaps onto the back and sides so you won't have any gaps once it's finished. I also forgot to mention this. You want the padding to be even with the armrest, but make sure the fabric extends just a little past that point so you don't end up with any gaps there either. We also need to cover the back of the armrest now. I probably should have covered this part with paper first, but I forgot, and by the time I remembered, it was too late. I cut a small piece of fabric and rounded one side and then glued it on. After that, I cut a few notches to help the fabric ease smoothly around the curved armrest and pressed it flat. Here's how it's looking so far. Next, we'll be using these inner chair and armrest pieces. First, we need to test the fit and make any adjustments. I had to trim a small section away here so that it would sit all the way back. I rolled it over the armrest and used my fingernail to crease it where it ends. That way I'd know exactly where to cut it. It should fit the other side too, but still check it first. Mine didn't, but that was probably because I forgot to glue this arm on first, like I mentioned earlier. I glued them down to some felt and cut them out. Make sure you have a right and left. I even labeled mine and still managed to make them the same. Then I glued them down to the fabric and cut around the edges. I added a few small notches to help the fabric ease and lay flat while I folded it over and glued it down. This is the point where I realized I had made two of the same, so I had to peel the fabric off and flip it over. Here I cut a small strip of fabric, folded the sides over, and glued it in place to cover the raw edge. Once that strip was in place, I glued on the inner armrest pieces. I used Aleene's Fast Grab glue for this and held it in place until the glue grabbed and everything was laying flat. Here's what we have so far. Just then, Aunt Clara walked in and, judging by the fabric, realized she's getting her chair. I cut two pieces and made adjustments like before. Oh, and just a little tip, just take off a little at a time so you don't end up cutting too much and having to start over. Everything's the same as the armrest pieces. I keep forgetting to mention this too. The glue stick is super tacky, so be careful not to get it on your outside fabric. It's almost impossible to get it off. Here I'm gluing those side pieces on, and I'm using Aleene's Fast Grab for this. I'm careful not to get any glue on the armrest. Press all of the edges down firmly since we have the bulk of the folded fabric, especially on these curved wing areas. You may need to hold them in place for a couple of minutes to help everything lay flat. For the inside back, I'm using 3 layers of batting between the fabric and the chair back. That'll give it that soft, comfy look. Aunt Clara said if the chair is comfortable enough, she could sit and sew for hours. Don't trim the top edge just yet, but go ahead and fold over and glue the other edges. And I forgot to mention that the back inner piece is 8 layers thick. I added a small strip of foam board here to give the back a slight tilt. It's a subtle angle, but it makes the chair look more relaxed and comfortable. Here I'm just trimming the batting so it's even with the back of the chair. Don't cut the fabric yet, just the batting. I'm just checking to make sure I trimmed enough of the batting away here. Then I add some glue to the front of that foam strip and I press the back piece into place. Leaving enough fabric to fold over the back of the chair, I gently curved it and then cut small notches. I should have lifted the batting to see the edge better. Some of my notches ended up too close. Then fold the raw edge over and glue it to the back. You can see here how my notches were a little too close. I'm pretty sure Aunt Clara was hovering over me during this part. I could practically feel her getting ready to snatch the scissors right out of my hand. I think it looks okay, and I'll be adding piping later, so that'll help hide the tiny mistakes. Even this corner here where I didn't fold quite enough fabric over. I told Aunt Clara she can unclench her tiny paws. The chair bottom and back overlay are done the same way as the side overlays. I dry fit them first and then they're glued to the fabric, trimmed, and the raw edges are folded over and then glued into place. I'm almost finished now, just a few more steps to go. Now I'm dry fitting these little front arm overlays. I made them a bit longer on purpose so I can trim off the extra. They're covered the same way as the other overlays. Once they're ready, I glue them in place, and you may need to hold these for a moment to make sure they stay pressed down. Aunt Clara has that little foot tap going. She's trying not to rush me, but she's definitely rushing me. I glanced at her foot and she said, "No, no, take your time. You're doing fine." I cut 2 pieces of foam board using the cushion pattern. Be sure to check the fit. And then I glued them together and covered the cushions with fabric and batting the same we did for the inside back. Aunt Clara is dying to flop into this chair like it's a Victorian fainting couch. To give the cushion a nice finished edge, I cut a strip of cardstock and glued fabric to it. Then I glued it around all sides of the cushion. You could probably skip the back side, but I went all the way around. Mine ended up hanging over a little in the front, but that's okay. The piping will hide it. For the chair feet, I glued together 8 layers for each one. You should have 2 for the front and 2 for the back. Then I drilled a small hole in each foot and glued a toothpick inside. I measured in about 1/4 of an inch from each side and drilled the holes. For the front legs, I glued them on with the widest part facing forward. For the back legs, the slanted side faces forward. I thought Clara might like an ottoman, so I started by cutting and gluing 8 layers of cardstock together for the base. I covered that in fabric, and using that piece as a pattern, I cut 2 pieces of foam board and glued them together. Then I covered the foam board cushion the same way as the chair cushion, with batting and fabric. I made another fabric covered strip to go around the edge and glued it in place. Then I glued the cushion and base together to form the ottoman. For the piping, I glued a piece of crochet thread onto a small strip of fabric and folded the fabric over it. Press the fabric right up against the thread and let it dry, and then trim close to the thread, just not too close or it may come undone. I applied a little Aleene's fast grab glue with a toothpick and pressed the piping into place with the cut edge facing inward. For the feet, I used 4 of the front chair legs, but you could probably even use beads if you'd prefer. Let's see how it looks in her living room. I even made a little pillow for her lower back. When Aunt Clara saw the ottoman, she just froze, like her whole life flashed before her eyes. I think she instantly pictured her feet up, a mug of hazelnut tea, and her sewing basket right beside her. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll see you next time.